So we continue to explore the place that it's said that we arrive at when we no longer need to try. And also to answer the question, why is it we have to know who we are and what we do? And it's already been said that in this place where we no longer need to try, if we don't know who we are, we're like a dead leaf being blown by the wind. Certainly a divine wind, but a wind nevertheless. And if we don't know what we do, we're merely a pawn, an instrument, a vehicle of that wind. So the statement is made, we must know who we are and what we do. But in our exploration there are several stories. One is a Buddhist story and one is a Sufi story. Let's see what they evoke for us in our attempts to understand what this place is, where we are when we no longer need to try. The first is a story about an old Tibetan Lama who had been in the monastery for many, many decades. But every day, without fail, he would go and sit by a little pond to meditate. But every day, when he sat down and was about to cross his legs in lotus and meditation, there would be a little creature on the pond struggling to survive. So he'd take up his creaky bones and save the little creature. And this went on throughout the whole meditation period. So it seemed in the observation by the other monks, but the old Lama never ever was able to sit down and go into transcendence and meditate, because they would go off into some little nook and cranny or some little cave and begin their chanting and their meditations. So the monks, one after the other, decided to give the old Lama advice. Why don't you go as we do and find yourself a little quiet spot in some cave somewhere, and several other pieces of advice that the monks would give him. And he listened very patiently to what they were advising him to do. One saying, if you go into that quiet place, you'll be enlightened and then you'll be able to save sentient beings. And after listening to all their advice, the old Lama said to them, I've been a monk for these many decades, and when I began my journey, I took a vow of Boddhicitta, that I would not rest until all sentient beings were saved. How could I go to some quiet place and transcend and chant and meditate when there is so much suffering? The second Sufi story is about that seeker after truth who went to many masters and many places seeking an enlightened being, and he finally came to one who he found indeed was such a one. And he said to him, please, would you let me travel with you so I can see the way? And the Sufi said to him, it will be of no avail to you, because you are still conditioned and would not be able to witness what you see with objectivity. But the seeker begged him, please, allow me, I will do whatever it is that you advise me to do to reach an understanding. So the Sufi said to him, "The only condition that I place on you is that you do not ask any questions of me unless I venture to explain to you myself." And this the seeker readily agreed to do. So they set out on their pilgrimage, and it so happened that they had to cross a wide river and therefore had to take a ferry boat across. Well, when they were on the ferry, secretly the Sufi bored a hole in the deck of the boat, letting in the water, and the seeker was greatly aghast, and he couldn't help himself. He said, "Well, what are you doing? The ferry boat is taking us over so kindly, and you're putting a hole in his boat." And of course the Sufi said, "Now, you agreed when we set out on this journey that you would not question what was being done." And so the seeker apologized profusely and promised that he would try to keep his peace from then on. And after much journeying, they came to a land where they were welcomed by the monarch of that place, who recognized the qualities of the Sufi. And it so happened that they were invited to go on a hunt with the king and his entourage and his family, as it happened. But while they were on the hunt, it came about that the son of the king was riding in front of the Sufi, and so the Sufi drove his horse so fast that the boy on the horse was driven, so that the horse got out of control and threw the young boy to the ground, injuring his leg very, very badly. But instead of stopping to aid this boy, the Sufi said, "Now ride your horse as fast as you can, we're out of here." Again, the seeker was aghast and shocked. "How can you, when we've been given the hospitality of this king, treat his son like this?" And again, the Sufi chastened the seeker, telling him and reminding him again of what he had promised to do, to keep his peace and not question what was being done. And further on in their travels, they came to another land. But although this land was very prosperous, as could be seen from the people, they were treated very badly. When they asked for alms, and they were chased away, even with wild dogs set upon them. But as they were hungry and thirsty and driven out of the city gates, it was found that the wall of the city was crumbling. So the Sufis said to the seeker, "Come, we have work to do." And tired and hungry and thirsty as they were, the Sufis set about mending the wall that had been breached. And again the seeker could not help himself. He said, "Here in two places you have ill-treated those who have treated us well, and here, when we're treated so badly, you're mending their wall." And the Sufi said to the seeker, "Now we have reached the end of our journey, you and I. But before we part, let me explain to you, for your education and perhaps understanding at some future time, the boat on which we were riding was going to be taken over by pirates and used to rob and pillage. But when it was scuttled, it could not be used as such. When the young boy was thrown from his horse, it was known that in the future he would have become a cruel despot, but anyone who was not of able body would not be able to attain to that throne, so it would not therefore be possible for him to reach that place where he could so cruelly and despotically rule. And in our third encounter, under this wall there is a great treasure, and there are 2 young boys, twins, in this city who will grow to find that treasure and be able to educate and edify the occupants of that place. Now, go your way until such time as the conditioning that has been your lot is gone, and you can look at the world, for I must now go and do what is there to do. Now be on your way. Without any judgment of Buddhism or Sufism, looking at these stories in the place where we find ourselves, no longer needing to try to be this or that, or do this or that, or become this or that. What do you see from the place you are now as the difference between these 2 stories? We know where we've been. We know our journey. We might have even known our purpose. Where are you now? What is this place where we no longer need to try to do in the way that we did before? What's the difference that you perceive between these 2 stories?
Second story is not to question who you are or whatever is to be done or seen. The first story is where you intend to do something. It's not possible because you've been blocked. It's meant to be that way. I'm not sure of that absolute differences. Because to me it's where you are supposed to be at all times, without question, no doubt.
What is this place?
Well, it's interesting because when you no longer need